The other day when we made our little basket weave hook, the only square punch I had was a little larger than the one I really wanted. So today I thought we would look at making another square punch. Welcome back to Black Bear Forge, where I hope to educate, inspire, and spark the imagination of anyone interested in the traditional art and craft of blacksmithing. Now for a project like this, a square punch that you hold by hand is probably more than adequate, but I've been needing to make some more tools for the treadle hammer, and I really like this little center punch I made a while back. It's just the right height for the treadle hammer. The handle is ideal. Nice metal ring handle. It's not going to rot, crack, fall off. Very practical, and I thought I would go ahead and do that today to make another square punch. So I'm going to start with a piece of 3/4 inch square S7 tool steel, cut 3 inches long. Now the S7 comes annealed, and since it's an air hardening steel and is very difficult to anneal after you've forged it, I'm just going to go ahead and drill a 1/4 inch hole through this, and that's all I need to mount the handle. This will deform a little bit while we're forging it, but I'll be able to drift the hole back to size and it'll work out just fine. This just makes life a little easier later. I'm going to start by drawing out the struck end to a short taper. I really don't want to reduce the size any. I just want to make the tool a little more tool-like instead of just a block of steel. This really doesn't do much for me. When I drilled my hole in the little piece here, the 3-inch piece, I drilled it at 1 1/4 inches from one end, so that's 1 3/4 inches from the other end, just slightly off center, and the struck end is at the shorter end of that. So I've just drawn out the 1 1/4 inch portion of this so that it's just a slight taper and nicely beveled edges, and then I'll clean up the struck end on the grinder. And that's all I'm going to do to that. Now it's time to draw out the punch end. And I'm going to use this big diagonal peen hammer for this. Start fairly close to that eye I drilled, and while I accept that I'm probably going to deform that, I'm going to try not to. I don't want to have to deal with it any more than I need to, but I already have a plan for when it's not round when I get done. This S7 gets real tough as it starts to cool down, so you need to keep it pretty hot. You don't want to make this too long and skinny, so it's really a fairly short taper down to that 1/4 inch. But it needs to taper gracefully enough that it can punch through a variety of things without getting too fat too fast. So it's kind of a balancing act. And I think I've got it about as far as I want to go with this hammer. Getting very close to 1/4 inch. I'm going to knock the corners off back up here by the eye a little bit. Not too far down. Make sure that looks square. And it does. It's probably a little oversized, but I will clean this up with a grinder and make sure it's even and truly square, not off in some direction. I'm going to go ahead and taper these edges of the, or not taper, but chamfer the edges of the eye. And that is kind of messed up now, but we're going to be able to fix that. One of the ways we're going to fix that eye is by just driving a 1/4 inch hinge pin drift in there. And while that's in there, I'm going to go put my touch mark on it. And that drift then supports the eye while I do this. And then I have a stamp that says S7 that I will do at the same time. That way I know what steel this is later. And we can drive the drift out. I think we'll do that one more time though. And first I am going to use my center punch as a countersink, so it helps seat the handle later. Now any deformity from doing this can be taken out with the drift. Remember, that drift was just in this hot steel, so don't pick it up with your bare hands. Perhaps a little bit cold, but drifting isn't forging too much material, so I think I'm okay. So the last thing I want to do is just make sure this is still straight. And straighten it out if I've been doing all that drifting. It looks pretty good. So that's really all I'm going for the forging on the tool. We'll clean it up on the grinder. As I mentioned, S7 does not normalize because normalizing is air cooling and this is an air hardening steel. So it is hardening as we're looking at it right now. To anneal this, it is something like a cooling rate of 50 degrees per hour until it gets down to about 1,000 degrees. So that's an overnight process. So I'm going to kind of split the difference. Instead of putting it in the vermiculite, I'm just going to leave it at the opening of the forge where it's going to be pretty hot and it's going to have to cool a little bit slowly. This is the handle shape we're going for. This is probably 3/8 round bar. I'm not too worried about the exact diameter. It doesn't need to be very heavy. And I've got something that's just out of the scrap pile. It's pretty close. I'm going to guess how much we need for the twist and bend that over. Just straighten it out a little bit there. Just get it close to what I want for that little twisted section. Then we'll heat it up and twist it. I'm just going to lock the little tail into this doubled over loop in the vise and hope it doesn't pop out. And I use a bar up here as my twisting wrench. And I just twist it around a few times till I kind of like it. Nice and easy to straighten this in the vise. I try and get the ring kind of cleaned up the way I want it. This is just a matter of how precise you want something like this. The tool itself probably doesn't care. It's just I care. That's pretty much all that I need to do to that. And I'll let this cool and we'll cut it off to length and do the other end. Now while that's cooling, I can put this right back down in here since there's no fire running in the forge, and we're just going to let that sit there. And when this is cool, I'll take that out and let it finish air cooling. Now there is absolutely nothing scientific or by the book with what I'm doing to de-stress this piece of S7. What I should do if I want it to be perfect is put it in the electronic oven and set a program that will cool it 50 degrees per hour from its critical temperature of something like 1725 until it's down to about 1100 degrees, I think is pretty much what the formula is. But that's a 12-hour cycle, and I'd like to finish this tool for the video. And S7 really can be quite forgiving, I have found. So this sort of crude de-stressing, vaguely normalizing-ish sort of a thing, I think will be okay. If you don't want to take the risk, follow the manufacturer's guidelines, do a proper annealing, and then harden and temper it. I just want to put a little 1/4-inch tenon on this. I'm not too worried about sharp corners because I kind of countersunk that hole with a center punch. And anything we need to do to this, we can clean up with a file. So, it's getting quite close. I might take one more heat, and I want to leave enough for a good head on the top. So I'm going to leave 3/8 of an inch or so for a head. So just a little cleaning up and we'll be done with that. It's really just this end down here that needs a little bit of cleaning up. And if that doesn't get it, we'll do it with a file. So that's pretty much all there is there. Well, let's see if that punch head is cool enough, and we'll go grind it. I want to go ahead and harden and temper this before I put the handle on, or at least I want to harden it first. I may temper it afterwards so we can go ahead and get it done all today. And really to harden this, I'm just going to bring it up to a nice bright orange, which is appropriate for S7. It's a lot hotter temperature than a W1 or an O1, something like that. And then I'm going to let it air cool. Then we'll use the torch to set the tenon on the rivet, and that will help temper this right around the eye a little bit, make this section less brittle, and hopefully bleed some heat up here. After that, I'll put it in the toaster oven for an hour and let it go ahead and have a real tempering cycle. Then I'll test it with a file tomorrow. I won't show any of that. We'll just do the hardening and put the handle on it, and then we will have a nearly finished tool, and the next time you see it, we'll put it to work. I'm going to start by heating the heavier end first, and then I'll push the whole thing into the fire a little bit further. Turn the forge off every now and then, let it heat slowly and evenly. Give it a little bit of a soak time. I'm happy with that, so I'm going to let that sit someplace without a draft and let it cool till I can touch it. Okay, so that's cooled down enough to handle it. It fits nicely down on our tenon. So that's done, and that fits down on our tenon very nicely. We're just going to heat the tenon up with a torch. And that helps temper that center section a little bit. And set our rivet. You can certainly use a rivet header on this if you want to. There's a nice solid attachment to the head. And other than tempering, that tool is ready to go. Well, it's a nice little square punch, all ready to go. Should be a very useful tool, and it's a nice matching companion for the little center punch. And I think I'm going to make a whole set of tools like this. I've actually already started on a little set hammer. I still need to harden and temper this and then make a handle for it. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up if you can. I'd love it if you'd hit that subscribe button. Then head out to your shop, but stay safe, wear your safety glasses, and we'll see you for the next one.